Welcome to the Early Child Agenda. We are so excited to have you all at this open house and appreciate you joining us today. I'm Amy O'Leary and I'm the Executive Director at Strategies for Children. And as you can see as our welcome sign, just a few, if you could change your name, pronouns, and organization in your name on Zoom. We'd love to see your faces, but not required. Your camera's on or off. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. This is a meeting and not a webinar. And please use chat. We will save the chat, and it's been so helpful to just, as we're gathering feedback, to have the chat box. Please also introduce yourself in chat as well. So as we move on to the next slide, we just really wanted to thank you for joining us. This is one of 2 open houses. We'll have another one tonight at 6 p.m. And what we'd like to do as we get started is just set the context and tell you a little bit about how we got here today. As many of you know, during the pandemic, we united as an early education and care and Friends of Early Education and Care field. We came together, and one way we did that was on the 9:30 call, which started as a 20-person invite list in March 2020, has now soared to over 1,000 people on a daily invite list with a 9:30 call 4 days a week. And we have updates from the field. We have experts that have written reports, done research, are implementing new programs. But most of all, it has been an incredible way to build community across Massachusetts. In our history at Strategies for Children, we have spent much time around the state of Massachusetts, in-person meetings before Zoom. And what we found with the 9:30 call was, while we know everyone can't join us right at 9:30 in the morning, we have been able to have a representation from across the state as well as different perspectives. And so we are using all of those lessons learned as we think about the next part of the work, as Strategies will be hosting this early childhood agenda. So I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Marissa Fear, who will be leading the work and the open house today. But please keep your introductions coming in chat. And Marissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Amy. All right, Jenna, you can pop over to the next slide. And before we get started today, we're going to do a short activity to get a better sense for who is in the room and to demonstrate some of the processes that we plan to implement with the early childhood agenda. So first, please take a moment to consider which of these 3 options best describes you individually. So 1, in my role, I interact with children and families every day. 2, in my role, I interact with children and families occasionally. Or 3, in my role, I do not regularly interact with children and families, but I do have a vested interest. So take a moment to consider which of those 3 options describes you best individually. And we know that if the people who are the closest to the work do not have a seat and a voice at decision-making tables, that will never get to the policy solutions that we know we need for young children and families. The intention of this technique is not to prioritize one person's voice over another, but to ensure that we are creating space for those with greater stakeholder perspective. And in the early childhood agenda, whenever we engage in small or large group dialogue, we're going to ask that participants invite number 1s to speak first if they have something to say, then 2s, and then 3s. So please take a few moments to finish putting your name and organization in chat if you have it, and then please add in which of those 3 numbers represents you best. So add a 1, 2, and a 3. And if you've already put your name and organization in chat, feel free just to put the numbers as well. And while you all are doing that, we will get started. So
and Marissa, one thing I forgot to mention is that we are recording this. I don't remember if I said that or not.
No, not yet. We forgot. Yeah.
As you join in, you should have gotten a prompt for recording, and we are going to post all of these recordings. So if folks couldn't join us today, they'll be able to watch the recording. So apologies. Take it away, Marissa.
Thank you. So as Amy mentioned, I'm Marissa Fear. I'm the Associate Director of Research and Policy at Strategies for Children, and we are the host organization of the Early Childhood Agenda. We are primarily an early education and childcare advocacy and policy nonprofit. And we know that many of you in this room have varied perspectives and lived experiences within the early childhood sector, and we're hoping that you'll bring all of that experience to this collaborative work. We all come to this work wearing a different hat. So you may be a parent of young children, you may work with young children, you may design programs for young children and families, or you may advocate on behalf of young children and families. Because of that, we all know that, Jen, you can pop over to the next slide too. We all know that the problem in Massachusetts is that we really need an integrated and accessible system of support for children from prenatal through age 8 and their families. The early childhood system is complex and it's difficult to define, and there's a crowded and yet siloed advocacy space in Massachusetts that lacks alignment at times. Because the system is siloed and because nobody has the time to look up sort of above the tree line, we don't always know what is happening in early childhood. So this fall, we will convene early childhood stakeholders around a consolidated early childhood agenda, highlighting priorities over the next 2 years. There are a lot of things that make a difference for children and families, and we don't want you to stop all of the excellent work that you're doing in addition to the priorities that are highlighted in the agenda. It's really about looking up, aligning, coordinating, sharing, planning for the future, and dreaming big while also working now in the immediate term. It's about coming together as people who care about early childhood and collectively saying that we're going to prioritize for greater impact. So this fall is just the beginning. We plan to convene stakeholders again in future years, but to think about using the same or an improved structure and format, but focused on a unified long-term early childhood plan for our state. So what is the early childhood system of all of our dreams, and how do we get there? What are the steps in the roadmap on the way there, and how long is it going to take? So that's future years, but this fall focusing on highlighting priorities over the next 2 years. And the next slide. So how does this help you? We're hoping first and foremost that this will lead to better policy development. So early childhood issues are interdependent and can't be developed effectively in silos. This convening will take a whole child approach. We'll take a whole child approach, and there you go. I think just back one. Take a whole child approach, working across sectors will allow us to identify effective solutions that may not be visible from one sector's viewpoint. It's also going to be opt-in advocacy, and this is really important because it will be both a public-private partnership where we are inviting state employees to participate in this. And we know that there are going to be many organizations and individuals that may not want to take a policy stance on the full agenda, but may only want to push forward the work of a portion of it or to advocate for a segment of the agenda. And so this is fully flexible, fully inclusive. We want as many voices at the table as possible. And so we're going to be presenting opportunities, and you can join whichever opportunities work best for you. It's also going to provide consistent check-in points, both online and in person throughout the fall and winter, with established feedback loops as partners develop advocacy agendas. So as we mentioned, we know there's so much good work happening in Massachusetts right now, and this is about looking up and sort of aligning, coordinating, and partnering with others working in early childhood. We also hope that this will be seen as a connection to trusted resources on early childhood issues, both externally, so thinking about decision makers and how they will view this early childhood agenda partnership as a connection to policy and practice experts, both statewide and nationally. So really pulling in the best practices nationally that we've seen around early childhood issues and the expertise that we know we have in Massachusetts. And then finally, shared messaging. So building out a communications infrastructure within the early childhood agenda so that we can develop shared messaging and push this forward together. All right, next slide. So we'll spend the next few slides talking about the process and how you can get involved. So to start, what is the early childhood agenda? It is a partnership, a process, and a product. So a partnership that connects organizations, parents, advocates, businesses, educators, service providers, government representatives that support the growth, development, and learning of our youngest children and their families in Massachusetts. And we do this through public awareness, policy development, and advocacy efforts. It's a way to connect early childhood stakeholders. And it's a process, a way to engage a community, the early childhood community. in consensus building around priorities and needs. And then finally, it's a product. So it will be a document at some point, a articulated set of priorities and questions as identified by the community. Next slide. So this process is made up of 4 different parts. First, priorities, which I think will really be the hallmark of this early childhood agenda. Second, questions. So what are the collective research questions that we have about early childhood, and how can we think about partnerships with higher education and answering some of those research questions. It'll also involve data. So when we have identified those priorities, what is the data that we have, what is the data that we need, and what is the interaction between the priorities and our data infrastructure in early childhood? And then finally, action. So how can we provide tailored advice for next steps? With action, it's really about what happens next. So once the agenda is finalized, who is going to carry this work forward? Is there an organization or a coalition who is really leading this work? And then who is the focus of that action? So are we thinking about the legislature or state government or philanthropy? Is there a key investment needed where we might need to be advocating for increased investment through the state budget process or increased investment through philanthropic dollars? And then is this an opportunity where we need policy change through legislation, or we need just sort of direct engagement with our state partners in informing program development or creating regulation change? Next slide. And zooming in on part 1 with priorities, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we're going to establish what the priorities are. And I think first and foremost, one of the very first things that the process of the agenda will do is to decide collectively on what are the guidelines for deciding these priorities. So that will be one of the first sort of tasks of the early childhood agenda, is coming to agreement on how we are going to be prioritizing issues and solutions. So with the help of facilitation, we're going to move through a consensus building process to identify these key priorities, starting with these big issue areas, getting a little bit more focused in on some smaller big issues, because we know that everything in early childhood is a big issue, and then eventually moving into solutions. So to take that conversation from what are the challenges that we've all seen over to what are the effective solutions that we can move forward with. And we're going to do this starting with sort of individual brainstorming to really draw on the collective expertise of early childhood stakeholders in Massachusetts, and to ask everyone to come up with some ideas on what are those 5 big issue areas that are the most important priority areas within early childhood, and then to share those ideas with each other, to move forward by grouping them together to see where we have similarities in these issues area ideas, and then finally to vote. So to provide an opportunity and a infrastructure online where we have the ability to sort of upvote priorities that we agree with or that we think should be prioritized. All right, next slide. And yes, Civic Research Agenda, credit to Kim Lucas. Thank you very much, Kim, for helping us with this process. So there will be 2 sort of primary levels of engagement with the early childhood agenda. The first is just universal participation. I want to be really clear on this part that regardless of which sort of pathway you choose that works best for you and how you can engage in this, that we will be providing opportunities so that there is sort of consistent engagement across both ends. So whether you're attending the actual virtual Zoom meetings with the working group, or you are signing up for the mailing listserv, that there will be opportunities to inform the agenda at every step of the process, and that we're really trying to ensure that all early childhood stakeholders are connected and active in the development of this agenda. And so we'll be sharing a variety of online and in-person engagement opportunities throughout the fall. So universal participation is just signing up for the mailing list. You'll receive latest news on our progress and general updates and opportunities to take action alongside of us. The second option is to sign up to attend working groups. And this is for individuals, organizations, and or businesses that are looking to help advance this work through direct collaboration and input. We also know that a working group meeting may not work for everyone, that you may be working with children throughout the day as an example. And so we want to be really clear that there will be participation opportunities across both of these different pathways. When you sign up for a working group, you'll be asked to sign up for one working group that is of particular interest and expertise to you and or your organization if you're there representing an organization, and attend working group meetings. There will be 6 working group meetings throughout the fall, and we'll share more about that later. If you're interested in more than one working group topic, we encourage you either to participate asynchronously, so to be able to sort of provide your feedback through that universal participation pathway on the other working group areas, or to invite others from your organization, if you are there representing an organization, to bring along team members and to sort of create an opportunity for very diverse perspectives within the early childhood agenda. Next slide. So the 5 working groups are financially secure families, high quality experiences, early childhood workforce, system infrastructure and local partnerships, and then healthy beginnings. And we'll share a little bit more later on about what we mean when we say financially secure families and high quality experiences. Next slide. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we are going to be helping stakeholders plug into issue groups of interest through the universal participation pathway primarily. So knowing that individuals, policymakers, organizations, state agencies, research expertise, and the sort of early childhood field at large will have an opportunity to participate in this, whether it's at 5 in the morning or 10 p.m. at night or 2 p.m. in the middle of the day. So really tailoring this experience so that you can participate when you want and how you want, and that there's a variety of choices to make sure that we're getting as many voices included in this process as possible. Next slide. We also want this to be a feedback loop. So I want to be clear also that the organizations and coalitions listed on the bottom of here aren't necessarily participating in the early childhood agenda. This was just an example of the great work that we know is happening in Massachusetts, that we know there are a variety of coalitions and a variety of organizations that are really have the content expertise on early childhood issue areas and that are engaging with parents and families, educators, early childhood working professionals, and that we want to provide an opportunity to align, to sort of look up above the tree line and see what else we're doing, where can we partner, where can we collaborate with each other as we're developing agendas and as we're thinking about the next 2 years. Next slide, thank you. And one of the ways that we're going to do that with the working groups is through a collaboration tool called Basecamp. So this will give us the opportunity to manage projects across multiple working groups and provide a one-stop shop for all materials related to the early childhood agenda. We can keep everyone informed and moving forward without all the virtual meetings. So knowing that October through the end of December is going to go by really quickly and that everyone's busy, a tool like this will really give us the opportunity to have some conversations offline, to utilize the message board or the group chat feature to continue these conversations, and then to share these resources on our website and through the mailing list so that there is sort of a transparent process across both pathways. And the organizations will receive access for organizations and individuals will receive access for free and can be assigned to specific projects within the Basecamp tool. Next slide. And this is just a quick preview of what Basecamp looks like on the inside. We are going to incorporate training and sharing a lot of the resources that Basecamp itself has on how to utilize the tool, and we'll also share how we plan to utilize the tool as well. But for those who are planning to participate in a working group, you would have access to Basecamp, and we'd be using that to sort of manage the work of the early childhood agenda throughout the fall. Next slide. The other sort of 2 resources that we plan to provide to partners who are participating in the working groups is sort of an online and virtual engagement and then in-person engagement toolkit and facilitation guides. So knowing that Strategies for Children has connections primarily within the early education and care field, but there are many of you on this call that are connected to other aspects of the early childhood sector, and we really want to provide opportunities and resources so that you can continue these conversations with the stakeholders that you are connected to, whether it's parents and families or other early childhood professionals who are working with young children, or other sort of various stakeholders within your networks. So creating the toolkits and facilitation guides so that at every step in the process, you can host similar conversations at planned meeting times, or to share the work of the agenda and bring it back to the groups that you may be convening. Next slide. So as an example, one of the ways that Strategies for Children plans to sort of utilize these two tools, online and virtual engagement, and then in-person engagement. Through online and virtual, we plan to bring the conversations of the early childhood agenda to our 9:30 calls. So to host specific times, both in the morning at 9:30, where we typically have the call slot, but we're also going to start doing the 9:30 call at night throughout the fall so that we can incorporate more feedback into the early childhood agenda process. And we know that not everyone can attend at 9:30 in the morning. So not 9:30 p.m., but thinking more like 6:30 p.m. as the time slot where we can host an evening conversation around the early childhood agenda. So to bring some of those conversations that are happening during the working groups to the 9:30 call and to continue to get feedback through that process. We're also going to be recording all of the working groups and posting them on YouTube, and sharing a variety of sort of summaries and notes and tools that will be used during the working groups on our website and utilize the sort of Google Drive features.
And Marissa, we had a question in the chat about the fall timeline, but I know we'll get to it. But so there is some intention behind that. So stay tuned. Keep the chat going. It's so great to hear from folks.
That's a great question. So I can give a sort of teaser, I think, of why the fall timeline. So yes, the work will continue beyond the fall. Thinking about future years as really that longer term agenda setting and planning for the roadmap to the early childhood system of our dreams, which is a different conversation than what we're planning on having this fall. The reason why the conversation is planned for this fall is because we know that the next 2 years also coincides with a change in administration, where we will have a new governor and a new administration in office, and with a new legislative session. So wanting to start the conversation this fall so that we are building these partnerships, we're creating this infrastructure within the early childhood system, and in anticipation of and coinciding with the next legislative session as well. So it's a great question. Thank you for posting that one. And then, oh, sorry, Jenna, one more on the last slide. So the other option for in-person engagement that Strategies for Children is going to be utilizing is our advocacy network for early education and care. So really relying on the previous cohort and the current cohort to bring some of these conversations to their local communities. So to think about how the advocates that we're engaged with are hosting small group meetings and how we can support them in continuing to get feedback and input on the early childhood agenda process. So that's an example of how Strategies for Children plans to incorporate this into our daily work. And I think it'd be really helpful to think through and to give us some feedback on what would be most helpful for you if you're here representing an organization to do a similar sort of process and how you can incorporate some of this feedback into your spaces.
And Marissa, along those lines, I've gotten some private chats at 6:30 at night. It's still hard for folks who have young children. So I think we will work, through a poll to try to figure out the best time. I know, and maybe we'll have 2 different times, but we understand, that life is happening all around us, and want to make sure we can provide some opportunities beyond 9:30 in the morning. Titus,
yeah. Titus has nothing. Okay. Yeah, completely agreed. I can speak for Amy and I on that one. Both of us will hop on a Zoom call pretty much anytime. So we'll do a poll and we'll see sort of what works best for everyone. And then ultimately the goal is to publish the agenda. So to have an opportunity to disseminate this to key decision makers and influencers, thinking about the governor and state agencies and legislators, thinking about local leaders, so your local mayor, school boards, press and media, funders, and then our federal delegation as well. So to have this be a document that we can share following the conclusion of this process. Next slide. All right, so timeline. I shared a little bit about sort of the high level why we, that's a great question too, Rosie. So yes, we are planning on utilizing translation. I know through the 9:30 call at night time slot, we've talked about doing that as well to offer translation during that time slot. And the agenda itself would be translated. And so we can think about also how to build in translation services throughout this entire process. It's a great question. All right, so for timeline, October through December, we'll be hosting 6 convenings to establish clear priorities for the early childhood sector, a true public-private partnership with members of state and local government participating. We're going to launch this online portal that will collect additional input from stakeholders, including from those who cannot attend the scheduled meetings on our website, and support partners to bring these conversations to local communities. Every week, you'll be able to find recordings of the meetings, notes, and other key resources on our website. In December, starting to draft the actual early childhood agenda. So to summarize the priorities of each convening, to move sort of above the working groups and to have a document that we are starting to draft in December, and then by January to finalize the agenda report of priorities over the next 2 years, and it's aligned with the 2023 and 2024 legislative session, and then to hold an event to release this agenda publicly to early childhood stakeholders, elected officials, the governor-elect, and new administration. All right, next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the early childhood agenda is going to be opt-in advocacy. So from January through June, we can really think about that as the opportunity for opting in, where we'll present a number of advocacy opportunities related to the early childhood agenda, and then we can monitor the state budget and legislative session over the remainder of the winter and into the spring. And then to plan for summer convenings to revisit the agenda, to grow and formalize the structure, to think about who was involved and who wasn't involved this year, and how can we sort of create those spaces to welcome them into this partnership. And then to clarify what worked well and what would we need to improve. So Strategies for Children is really big about Plus Delta, and that's something that I know we plan to incorporate a few times throughout this process too, and both to change sort of week to week so that we're making improvements based on the first meeting to the third meeting, but also thinking about at the conclusion of this process, what are some larger scale changes that we can make in thinking about this for future years. And then next fall to convene the field again using the same or improved structure and format, but focusing on that unified long-term early childhood roadmap for our state. Next slide. And this is the meeting schedule for the working groups. So the first welcome meeting will be on October 19th. Times and RSVP links are coming very soon. And there will be a series of 6 working group meetings throughout the fall. So the first one on October 19th, and then working group meeting 1 will really be about those big issue areas. Working group 2, thinking about those smaller big issue areas. Working group 3, thinking about the solutions. And in between that, we'll have a process where 1, we're sort of bringing it all together. We've identified what some of those smaller big issue areas are, and we want to bring all the working groups together to reach consensus and to share out from each of the different working groups, knowing that there needs to be collaboration between the working groups themselves. And then you might also notice there's a stewardship team nomination process in mid-December or mid-November. So as part of the early childhood agenda infrastructure, we also know that that fourth part of the early childhood agenda, the action part, the what happens next part, who's going to carry this work forward, requires some strategy, and it will require sort of working together collaboratively. So as part of this structure, we're going to ask working groups to nominate 2 organizations or coalitions from that working group after we have identified, or we've started to identify, what the priorities are. So who are the 2 organizations or coalitions that are best positioned to carry this work forward, to carry the priorities that we've identified collectively forward, and then to come together as the stewardship team to manage and guide that work throughout the fall and into the winter. And the exciting thing about that model that we are looking forward to is that we hope that will change every year, that as priorities shift and as the work changes, that the stewardship team would also change, and that we really be getting the organizations and coalitions who are doing that work together in the room, and then changing that from year to year. And then finalizing the agenda in December and the event release into January. And then next slide. So you might have wondered what I mean when I say financially secure families. So this is an example. We started this conversation on the 9:30 call actually to gather some input on what are the potential topics of discussion that may come up in each of these working groups. And I think I'll really pose this to all of you and say, what do you think of when you think of financially secure families? So if you have any additional thoughts that aren't included on this slide right now, please put them in the chat, because this will also be one of the first activities of the early childhood agenda, is us all coming together and agreeing on what are the topics that we want to discuss in this working group, and then narrowing in from there. So really starting with that brain dump of what's everything that we can think of within this area, and then narrowing in on priorities. So financially secure families, you may think of family affordability for childcare as one of those big topics that fits into this category. You may also think about the business community and what are employer best practices and incentives for early education and care benefits. That's another topic that might fit into this category. We've also talked about paid family medical leave and tax credits, affordable housing, credit counseling and building, and transportation. So these are just a few examples of the many topics that we know could fit into this conversation. Next slide. I'm seeing some come in the chat right now. Thank you so much. I was just going to
say, we have some great ideas coming into the chat, and just want to reiterate that we know there are groups and coalitions. You know, one thing about Massachusetts is we have no shortage of networks, alliances, coalitions, people who are dedicated to doing this work. So this is about aligning and coordinating and making sure, as we've said, like lived experiences, kind of with this early childhood frame, are part of those conversations. So we would not expect, you know, we know there are other groups working on these issues. We just want to really make those connections as strong as they can be. But keep the suggestions coming in chat. Thank you.
All right, next slide. So for high quality experiences, really thinking about both, no matter where a child is, whether they're in an early education and care program, whether it's center-based or family childcare, they're home with their family members, they're in friend and family or neighbor care, that no matter where that child is, that the early childhood system is positioned to provide a high quality experience for that child. So thinking about the programs that the families are interacting with, the services that the children are receiving, and ensuring that everything is high quality across Massachusetts. So a few examples of what we might think of there is parenting supports, really thinking about early education and care. Educator coaching is a potential topic that could fall into this category. Social emotional learning was a topic that was brought up. Play in early childhood was the topic that was brought up. All right, next slide. I'm loving the chat right now. Thank you all. And some potential topics of discussion for the early childhood workforce. So really thinking holistically about who is in that definition of the early childhood workforce, and how are we creating a workforce pathway? How are we supporting their compensation? How are we ensuring that the professionals who are working with young children are the best prepared, best supported professionals that they can be? So for this category, we might think about scholarship supports and tax credits for the early childhood workforce. We can think about higher education and workforce pipelines, apprenticeship models, career ladder and competency-based credentialing systems, and many, many more. All right, next slide.
Marissa, I saw a question in the chat about participating in 2 groups. If we wanted to address that right now. I know we had talked about if you are interested in more than one out of the 5 working groups, we are encouraging that if you have somebody on your team or from your organization, maybe you can bring them along with you. So if you participate in one, they participate in another, and then you guys come together and kind of talk about what you've learned from each. Or we are also encouraging you to participate in one working group for continuity and consistency, but then you can also participate in the other working group offline asynchronously. So we will be utilizing Basecamp as well as the website for you to, give input. We're going to use message boards, other forms of collaboration tools that you can then offer input, and then also see how the conversations are unfolding.
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly. The working groups will all meet at the same time. So that's our only reason for why we're not going to be able to allow multiple sort of participation in different working groups. But to Jenna's point, because we're meaningfully sort of creating this infrastructure so that those who are not attending the working groups can participate sort of equitably. If you can't attend all of the working groups at the same time, you'll still have plenty of opportunities to inform the other working groups as well. All right, next slide. So for system infrastructure and local partnerships, really thinking about what are the sort of core components of the early childhood system that we need to have in place in order for it to succeed. And for local partnerships, we know that a lot of this work is going to need to happen at the local level. So what is the local infrastructure that needs to be in place in order to ensure that parents, families, and early childhood professionals have a voice at decision-making tables, that there's funding and there is support to carry this work on locally, and that we have a system in place that is sort of set up to succeed. So under this category, I think financing is a big part of that. Thinking about local governance structures. So how are we ensuring that the voices of those who are closest to this work are involved in decision-making tables? Thinking about sort of professional development centers and facilities for childcare, thinking about mass hire career centers and family resource centers, libraries, sort of community engagement, children's museums, the variety of sort of local partnerships and components of an early childhood system that we know need to be in place. All right, next slide. And this is a great segue because I see that healthcare providers, so the final working group is Healthy Beginnings. So knowing that there is this massive intersection between health and early childhood, and wanting to include a working group that is focusing specifically on what does it mean to have a healthy beginning. And knowing that a lot of that has to do also with the adults that are attached to children, and that ensuring that we are having sort of healthy prenatal and birth supports, thinking about child development tools for parents, comprehensive services, screening, food insecurity, nutrition, formula and diaper, thinking about WIC, dental and vision care. So there's sort of a variety of, no, it was perfect, Dodie, thank you. A variety of components within Healthy Beginnings that would fall under this working group. All right, and then final slide, and then we'll pause for questions, comments. The chat's really great, and I think we'll invite you all to share sort of live as well if there are any additional thoughts about how you see yourself engaging with this, and thoughts on the design of the program as well. So the final slide here talks a little bit about what the final product will look like. So priorities within the early childhood sector. So really thinking about, we identified those big issues, the smaller big issues, and then we eventually got to the solutions. And the solutions are what will end up on that final priority document. So this is the priority. This is what we want to see happen over the next 2 years. It'll also have the research questions that fall under that early childhood portion of the system, and the data needs. So in order to effectively measure our impact, in order to see how we are doing with this solution, what data do we already have? What data do we need? What's the infrastructure that we need to have in place? And there will also be a data team that's part of in addition to the stewardship team, a data team that is focusing specifically on data, and that will elevate lots of those data needs from the working groups, and think about how we can push that work specifically forward, because we know that data is a huge component of this work. It'll also have the focus. So thinking about, this is our solution and this is who it is addressed towards. So if the solution is we need to file a piece of legislation, that would be directed at the state legislature. If the solution is we need to have a regulation change in state government, it would be directed at either state or local government. And then if the solution is that we need key investment in this area, but it may not be a good fit for state funding, then the focus would be on the philanthropic community, and thinking about funders as that sort of target or that focus. And then finally, action. So this is really where that stewardship team comes in. So the solution has been identified. Who's the lead advocate to push this work forward? The organization or coalition who is doing this work already, because as Amy has mentioned before, we know that a lot of this work is already happening and it's in motion. So who is pushing this forward? Where is the key investment needed? So are we advocating for increased dollars in the state budget process? Are we advocating for increased dollars in the local context, or in sort of the funder community as well? And then thinking about strategy is the final sort of component of action there. So is this a policy change? Is this a regulation change? Is this implementation advocacy? So an example of that is we know the Children's Mental Health Campaign passed a bill last session that is going to be implemented this year. And how do we think about informing the implementation of these policies after legislation has been passed? So again, really balancing the planning for the future while also acting in the immediate, knowing that there are things that are happening right now that we want as an early childhood community to inform. And then finally, program design. So as our State Department partners are designing programs, how can we provide real-time feedback and input into the design of those programs so that they're best positioned to serve children and families? And with that, I am going to pause and I'll turn it over to my partners and see if there are any questions in the chat or if we want to open it up to partners.
So first, a huge thank you to folks who kept the chat going, brainstorming. There's no right or wrong answer. Even if it didn't fit in the category you think that was mentioned, it's so great to have all this kind of data and information. Secondly, in the name of continuous improvement, Tom Weber pointed out in the chat and this morning in the 9:30 call about a federal strategy as well. So we have not updated that action. You can see key investment or policy, but we know the federal government plays a huge role in thinking about young children and families. I also know that watching the Early Education and Care Board meeting yesterday and the talk about rates and geographic differences and how are we going to kind of pull more from the existing money that we have could have been a different conversation if we had passed Build Back Better and had $400 billion on the table for childcare in this country. We did not do that. We have opportunities to continue to, influence that federal agenda. I also will say that we know this is a lot of information that you're getting, but we also know that many of us have been talking about this for decades and decades. And we are excited to think about this time in the history, having the largest historic budget for early education and care in the state since it was created, the department was created. This kind of better awareness of how policies impact day-to-day lives of children and families. And just to pull something that came to me personally in the chat, something around food. So somebody mentioned in early education and care, they're paying $130,000 to support food needs of their families. We know that in Massachusetts, we now have free school lunches. What's the early ed companion piece to that? Or have we talked about that? What could that look like? That's a perfect example of how we envision this agenda to help kind of pull all this best information that we have. And then I would say we are committed to action. And we really want to think about where the policy, intervention should be happening, while acknowledging we had a question on the 9:30 call this morning about the Economic Review Commission that the legislature created last year that issued a report. Of course, that will be part of this work going forward. The Common Start legislation that rallied hundreds of people across the state. All of those pieces will be part of this work going forward. So I think, no idea is too small to put on the agenda. And then the stewardship committee, we really thought long and hard. We didn't want an advisory committee. We didn't want a steering committee, because we thought stewardship is we are going to take these ideas and have a group of people who have that content expertise to help get them to the next level. So that's a little bit about the structure. We also, I think, to the group question, instead of trying to plan 5 groups times 5 meetings between now and the fall, we really wanted to think about how do we concentrate our best efforts first, with virtual meetings, and then thinking about this online resource that we'll have. We also will provide technical assistance and support to using the online tool, because we know tools like that are only as good as people who are using them and inputting data. So we will, take that into consideration. So I don't know if there were lots of questions in chat. And I think one of them, this is the dangerous part where I go back and try to, libraries, definitely, all of the, how we include family childcare, yes. Any other of SFC teams see anything? Now we're hearing that the free lunches are not so high quality. let me see. Or if anybody wants to come up, maybe you should stop share and we can see everyone. And so if you want to come off mute and share thoughts, observations, or additional questions.
I did see a comment somewhere about if we'll have summaries of meeting
Okay.
notes, agendas, that kind of thing for you all to share back with your teams or superintendents and school leaders, organizational leaders. So if there's a format that works best for you all, I know we'll be using Basecamp, and then we'll probably be using, I don't know if Marissa, you've mentioned some of the collaboration tools like it's not Jamboard, but it's similar to Jamboard. We'll probably be using something like that. That'll be kind of like a static thing. That'll
We're
create.
I haven't mentioned them, but that's a great point. So we're essentially bringing the sort of whiteboard sticky note process virtual and having it live on the website so that we know that we can use that tool during the working groups, but we can also share that tool through the online, through our website and through like online engagement with the mailing list, so that if you can't attend a working group, you can still heavily inform the development of the agenda by participating in the tool. So that's essentially the way that we're hoping to sort of do that brainstorming, sharing, grouping, and then voting process is with a tool like that, which will be available on the website.
So that's another piece is we're going to create, we're in the process of creating kind of an agnostic website. So it's going to be separate from Strategies for Children, where we'll post information, kind of use it as an archive and active site. And I was going to say something else and it's gone. It's been so exciting to see the chat. Oh, sign up for a working group. Marissa will handle those logistics, we know. Oh, the other
Can
thing
I offer
is
something? So
yes, let me say
many
what
of
I'm
you
going to
are
say.
part of groups, local initiatives. I was chatting with Sandra from the New Bedford Birth to Third Partnership earlier. We will have facilitation guides, templates, simple, straightforward, document templates that you can then take with you to a local meeting or a group that you're involved in, collect feedback, quick and easy feedback about the agenda, and then share it back with us. We can incorporate it with the agenda. So we hope to have this sort of ripple effect to reach a lot more than, just the 84 people on the call today, although that is a large number, but we know there are hundreds of people across the state, thousands probably, working on these issues. And we want to reach as many as we can in the time that we have. So if you're not seeing those tools from us, let us know, but we'll try to be proactive and produce them within the next few weeks.
We will also be
Jody.
dedicating 9:30 calls at 9:30 a.m. and the 6:30 call at 8 or 8:30 at night to use those as kind of a summary sessions to engage people who haven't been able to, either physically Zoom into the working groups, or, we can summarize what's happening to collect kind of information. We are going to also, along with the working groups, be kind of collecting all this information, analyzing the information, kind of that continuous process. So I think Ginny put in the chat, no wrong door for engagement. And I think we do want to make it as easy as possible to how you engage groups you are already at and with. One of our first Plus Delta kind of exercises will be, tell us about an online kind of an experience that worked well. Tell us about something that you would change for next time, because the expertise, that exists here is incredible. And we want to think about how we can build on and learn from lessons learned.
And to Amy's point, we all know that everyone here on this call has been a part of a lot of working groups, commissions, meetings, etc. So what worked well about those, what did not work well about those. Let's hope that this is going to be a positive experience for everyone. And I'm seeing some. Yeah, I was just exactly perfect timing. So I'm sharing in the chat right now the sign up form, and the sign up form will collect basic information from you. And then on the second page, it'll ask for sort of your level of engagement. So whether you are interested in participating in the working groups or not. If you select no, then you'll get the general announcements and we'll share the online opportunities to engage with the agenda process, but you won't get the Zoom information or some of like the logistics around the working group specifically. There's always time to change your mind. And if you want to attend a working group meeting later on, feel free to do that at any point. But just wanting to sort of find the pathway that works best for you, that makes the most sense for how you want to engage with this process. If you do want to participate in a working group, then we'll make sure that you receive the Zoom information in the next few days.
We are also working with Mo Barboza as a facilitator, and Mo has been doing facilitation for decades. He has also been really working closely with the communities in Boston around the Birth to 8 initiative through the Boston Opportunity Agenda. And we are really excited to be working with Mo, and he shares our values and our kind of our vision for this work. And so we are excited to work with him and thinking of how this can really turn into action. I see a +1 to Tom.
And I see Rosie's point again too about mental health. So yes, that is definitely on the agenda. I think that's actually a great example, because we do know that there was a piece of legislation that was passed last session, and that they're going to be focusing on implementing that legislation this session. So both sort of the immediate term, how are we working to impact the implementation of that legislation, but then also planning for the future and thinking about what are the unaddressed early childhood mental health needs that we know that children and families have right now.
Any other thoughts, observations, questions? We also, I think now we'll start with the song every time, since that seemed to be well received. We'll have a playlist. I think directors have been another constituency that we want to think about what the supports look like for them. That may be a great example of that. It's not a bill, but maybe there's a directors, you know, a directors group that's formed across the state or regionally that can help. I know we used to have those. We are so thrilled to have folks join with us today. Please, if you have any questions, all of our contact information is available on our strategies website. Most of you have it. If you know someone who you want to make sure is at the table and you don't know if they'll be, please let us know. We really want to emphasize this open door, everybody is involved spirit. I think Marissa may have shared that when we started the 9:30 crawl, people were still suspicious because I think we're also used to being shut out of tables, but we really want to bring the tables to people. So Brian has a question about the sign-up sheet. Can you add definitions and goals of working groups? Good idea.
Great idea.
I'm like Anchorman, I'm going to read it all. Okay, we'll keep the chat going. We have 4 more minutes. Jenna, maybe you can play us some going out music if you want to keep the chat going or ask us questions. Or we'll stay on a few minutes, and really appreciate all of your feedback. We use chat and keep in touch. So we'll send a follow-up with the slides and all the follow-up information. So thank you and see you soon.